Hey, it's Pastor Dan with another Proverbs Practical. Appreciate you watching today. Our last video pointed out that actions express character. This next verse shows that who you live with matters far more than where you live. We're in Proverbs 21, verse 9. And it says, "It is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house." So we all get this in principle, right? But it's kind of hard to live sometimes. Who you live with makes a much bigger difference to your happiness than where you live. Now Solomon, the guy who's writing this, Solomon knows houses, and Solomon knows wives. He has a palace, and he also had wives that tried to control him, and eventually succeeded to some extent, actually turning his heart away from the Lord. Basically, he's talking about the misery that a contentious wife can bring into a home. And I think this would apply to a contentious husband as well, but he's writing this to a son, so of course the son would have a wife, and so he writes it from this direction. The word for brawling speaks of contention. And this is an easy trap to slip into. In the biblical model of the home, the woman doesn't have the authority to simply set the direction of the household, let alone tell her husband what to do. Now, she may be convinced that she's right about something. She might very well be right about that thing. But she doesn't have the authority and the power to just make a decision and expect her will to be followed by everyone in the household. So the temptation is, if people aren't doing what she thinks is right or what she knows is right, to fight for it, to continually manipulate or bring arguments or put pressure upon the people who do have the means to make that thing happen. When it doesn't happen right away, she keeps pressuring, usually because she's sure she's right. But you can be right about an issue or a practice and still destroy a relationship. The warning, I think, would be double. One would be to the man who might be caught in this situation, warning him about the danger of such a person. We're all under authority, whether it's an employer, a parent, a government, and sometimes we are going to think we know better than our authority, that we're right and they're wrong. And sometimes we will be right about that. We all know cases where the employee knows better than the boss what's supposed to be done or how something works, or was right about some situation. But how a person handles those situations where they're convinced they're right and their authority is wrong, it says a lot about their character and how they'll do in other authority relationships too. A contentious spirit or a rebellious attitude, no matter how earnestly it's intended or confident that it's correct, is an attempt to exercise authority where we don't hold authority. So if you're a guy and you're considering marriage, take note of how the woman deals with her other authorities. If she can't exist in those settings without strife, particularly when she disagrees with them, then she's going to have a hard time doing it with you too. And the other side of this may be for the woman. Many a woman complains that her husband is distant, that he spends more time in his man cave or out with the guys or away on the lake or up in a deer stand than he does with her, that he's retreated off to a corner, if not physically, then mentally and emotionally. But she doesn't consider that she may have driven him there. Her brawling may not have been physical. She may not have been punching him. It may not have been shouting. She might not have been yelling at him. But if there was contention, that has an effect on the relationship. He made decisions or took actions. And because she didn't agree with them or approve of them, she contended with him. And eventually, rather than keep fighting, constantly defending himself and arguing, he just withdrew because it was better to be living in a corner on a rooftop with nothing but a tarp to keep the rain off his head, so to speak, than to be in this constant fight, constantly defending his actions and decisions and character. Now, she may tell herself that she keeps pushing because he just doesn't understand. But often he has heard, he understands, and just doesn't agree. And at that point, the pushing only ends up pushing him away. He'll feel like he can't have deep and real conversations with her because she'll judge what he says and she'll use what he says against him, and because she cares more about proving she's right and getting her way than she does having the right kind of relationship or having a husband who can function in courage and conviction and commitment, knowing that those under his authority will back his play instead of undercutting and undermining it. I will add another caution to the husbands here, though. Wives aren't perfectly spiritual any more than we are. We all have a flesh, a sin nature. We're all affected by stumbling blocks. Guys, if you've been under authorities, you know how much easier it is to work peaceably and supportively under some authorities than under others. Often we, as authorities, can reduce the contentions by making sure we do understand what our wives think and are feeling and want, where they're coming from and why they're saying what they say, and show them that we understand where they're coming from. All the more if we show that we are willing to sacrifice ourselves, to give up our wants and wishes, privileges, and even rights for their sake, it makes it much easier for them to follow without conflict, just like it does us with any other authority. Authority, in Christ's way of doing things, should be used more for the people under us than over the people who are under us. If they get the sense that we are using our authority more to look out for ourselves than for them, well, that's a stumbling block. It breeds conflict. And maybe they shouldn't stumble on that if they're perfectly spiritual, but maybe we shouldn't put the stumbling block there in the first place. Now, this doesn't guarantee that there will be no conflict. Even a perfect leader is sometimes going to be challenged and questioned and doubted and contended with. Jesus himself, the most perfect leader there ever could be, had people, even his own disciples, contend with him at times. Their wives, and any person can fall into this, just as any person can fall into making decisions in selfishness, who aren't content with being heard and considered, but feel they must be obeyed, or their convictions and their assessments followed, and they'll fight if they aren't. It's far too easy to tell ourselves that anything is justified if we're right, to rationalize fighting against or striving with our authorities. But this verse tells us about the outcome in the home if we do. It speaks of the misery in all too many relationships where contention has replaced submission and support. We should each do what we can to make our homes places of peace and closeness rather than contention and distance. Our home is more than our house. And who we share it with and how we share it matters a lot more than how big it is. I hope this video is a help to you. If it is, give it a like. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear from you in the comments, and we'd love to see you in person here at Dexter Gospel Church. Until next time, I hope you stay well and live at peace.